Hello and welcome to SCA's webinar with Dr. Amalia Oliveira Riley on leading change in a dynamic business environment, moving from managing to embracing. Before we start today's webinar, I'd like to start a poll to get the demographics of our audience. So I'm going to launch the first question.
Mary, would you like to turn on your camera as well?
Oh, I thought I did. Oop. Is it not? It's not turning on. Sorry, I'm new. Why is it doing it? Are y'all seeing my screen at all? I apologize. Are you seeing my screen, Amalia?
We're seeing the looping presentation, the first page.
Okay, good. That's what I have showing.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. Okay. So let me launch the poll.
There we go. Now we see you.
Okay. All right. So that's working. So I'm going to launch the poll. So it's not letting me launch. I've lost my control panel. All right. Let me just, I can't see anything. I'm going to just go ahead and go with the introductory slides.
Yes.
Okay. Welcome, everybody. Today's presentation is by Amalia Oliveira Riley, leading change in a dynamic business environment, moving from managing to embracing. Amalia is an executive leader with 30 years of experience in oil and gas industry. She's held positions of leadership with 30 years of experience in the oil and gas industry. She's held positions of leadership at executive positions with Exxon, Repsol, and Tullow. Amalia's strength includes her strategic vision, her organizational leadership, and implementing change. Amalia was on the World Energy Council in 2020 as on the list of influential women in energy. She has a PhD in geoscience from Purdue University and has lived in Houston, London, and Madrid. She grew up in Argentina, and she's fully bilingual in English and Spanish. Amalia leads our SCA's business advisory services, including items related to asset value optimization, organizational efficiency, non-operator influence, strategy, and transformation. We have another webinar coming up soon on April 1st with Dr. John Rosine, entitled Deep Water Sedimentation and Stratigraphy, and that is on Tuesday, April 1st at 12 noon Central Time. And a couple of upcoming classes that we have that are live in person in Houston. We have Dr. Steven Sonnenberg presenting his reservoir characterization for mudrock reservoirs, May 5 to 7. And Dr. Christopher Zahm presenting structural styles and interpretation in petroleum exploration and production, May 5 to 8. Both of those are in our Houston training facility. You have options, and I'm sorry.
We're now seeing the poll.
Oh, great.
I don't know.
Well, let's stop and do the poll then. Great. Thank you for, I see people are voting. So I'm going to close this one, and you could see that 50% are geoscientists and 50% are other. And we'll launch the second question on how many years of full-time experience do you have? Less than 1, 1 to 10, 11 to 20, 21 to 30, or over 30. Are y'all seeing that?
Yes, we're seeing the poll.
Okay, good. All right, so please go ahead and vote. Here we go. Votes are still coming in. Okay, I think most everybody has voted, so I'm going to close the poll. And we have mix spread out. We've got 9% in 1 to 10, 36%, 11 to 20, 36% to 21 to 30, and 18% over 30 years. Okay, so let me close that.
Welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are connecting from. My name is Amalia Oliveira Riley, and I'll be speaking about leading change in a dynamic business environment. I'd like to start with a little introduction about Subsurface Consultants and Associates for those who are not familiar with us. So we are an industry leader in subsurface exploration and development. We offer customized consulting for short projects or full consultations. And then we have a track record for formation training in the classes for very fundamentals of subsurface topics. And we do full development programs as well as public and private group trainings. And the part I'm leading at SCA is management consulting. So we're offering strategy, change management, optimization, organization, things like that. And we're going to talk about change management today. To make you familiar with some of our clients, we work with a lot of the majors, some of the mid-sized companies, and a number of NOCs in the oil and gas space. So I'm sure we've known you from one place or the other. And we are well known for training professionals with 27,000 professionals trained worldwide. So let's get to the topic at hand today. I'll be providing a few thoughts and a process for tackling change management, and then I'll share with you a few examples from my leadership times where I applied these principles through a number of changes throughout my career. And really, a dynamic world that we live in today demands constant evolution. We are needing to adapt the business to work effectively. We need to adapt to new environments. Sometimes we have different goals that our companies want to attain. And some of the things that push us into engaging with change are culture, engagement, understanding, what our workforce is motivated by. Sometimes it's needed to get alignment when, after running the business in a certain direction, we're not feeling like we're working together in the same direction. Sometimes safety and environment regulations, sometimes new requirements bring us to the point where we need to adopt new ways of working. Sometimes it is about technology. We want to adopt something that helps us be more efficient, do things in a simpler way, remove some of the bottlenecks. And of course, optimization, making better value decisions for the company. There's always pushes to do this. So from many, many different angles, our businesses are constantly pushed towards adopting change, evolving, doing new things. And what happens most of the time is that we will start the rationale for change with the financial resilience. There's an incentive to either save costs or get greater value for our shareholders that has to do with financial resilience. And we put our minds to that, make all the calculations, makes financial sense, we launch into that. And then the second thing we typically tackle is the business model and some innovation capabilities. We get excited about some new market we'd like to enter into, maybe some innovation that we'd like to adopt in our workflows. And those two typically pinch the organizational resilience. So these two things require people to be mobilized and be bought in, be part of the equation, make changes, adopt new workflows, work with different teams, and that's where the rub comes. If we don't focus enough on the people, what the people is who's going to make the business successful or provide financial results. So a lot of it comes from the focus on financial and business side of things and not enough on the people side of things. So let's focus a little bit on the people then. So the performance focus does not address the person. And I think that's where the anthropological model comes into place. A person is structured in such a way that they have their layer of behavior, kind of the outer things, what they do, right? They have their layer of intellect or their mind, right? And that drives a lot of what they do. But really what drives most of what they do without great effort comes from their core values. So that's what motivates, that's what's automated into your behaviors, right? And many of the change efforts start at the level of the intellect. We plan these very rational, logical arguments that show why we should adopt a change. And that speaks to the mind, and that's great. But that doesn't get us moving in a more automated way, right? So to tap into those core values is what motivates a person to get moving in a new direction. So what we'll talk about today is how to engage that part of the person. If you engage into something that you want to do, a new change, I mean, many of you may have dreamed of buying a new house or moving to a different country or traveling to a new place. And all of those things come from your core. That's what you want to do. And when it comes from what you want to do, well, you do it with excitement, right? It's you don't feel the pain, and you're ready to put on the sacrifice to attain those new goals. So how do we get to the core values of the person when thinking about organizational change? One of the models for change that I like to talk about, I think is one that has great merit and it's pretty easy to adopt, is a model from Switch. Chip and Dan Heath have put this model together in 2011, and the book is just fascinating. I highly recommend it. It's good for anything that involves change, from going on a diet to changing the world. So a great model and pretty simple, which is something I really like. So they talk about directing the rider. In this model for change, they think of the person as the elephant with a rider on top, right? And the rider is the intelligent, the rational mind. And the elephant is the emotional mind. And that gives you a sense on how easy it is to maybe convince the rational mind, but how difficult it is to motivate the emotional mind, right? And shaping the path is controlling the situation of environment. In many organizational changes, at least the ones I've been a part of, we start with directing the rider. We build all these logical arguments. We talk about business performance in the past. We put together some new models, and we share how these new models might lead to better results. And we are speaking to the rational mind and only that part of the person. In a few better led efforts, I've seen where we shape the path. The second piece is to say, well, we're going to put this organization into place or these procedures into place that'll make it easier to walk in the path that we'd like to walk. So instead of asking you to shape behaviors on your own, they put some guardrails to help you behave in better ways or in ways that are aligned with the new path. And that has a little bit of leading and managing at the same time. But what makes change be more effectively adopted is motivating the elephant. And that's a piece where you can actually help people embrace the change, really be encouraged, have inspiration to go in the direction that you want. So we will be focusing on that piece quite a bit. So just to recap that, in most of the organizational change efforts, there's lots of effort on the why we need to leave the current situation. And that appeals to direct the rider, right? The more effective tactic is to focus on where do you want to go, why you want to go there, why the destination is appealing, and get the person to motivate that elephant of emotions and get that part of the person really going. So with those 3 steps, one thing that I've learned through my career in change is that if we target a lot of things, for sure we'll cover all the difficulties that you're having. You'll identify the issues and you'll be in a better place. But addressing lots of things, like most of the change management processes suggest, takes a long time, and it's a very cumbersome process. So it is much more effective to focus on just a small number of things that will generate very large impact and let the rest fall into place. So no worry too much about all the details that come with a change. Focus on just a couple of things and make that the focus. It's impossible to focus on 200 things. So to focus, it needs to be a handful of things, maybe 5, something that you can remember, that you don't need a piece of paper to remember or to share with someone what the change is about. A very small number of things. I think that's one of the biggest keys to success in change, is to tackle a very, very limited number of things. That way, it's easy to have clarity in the mindset that underpins the change. So instead of articulating, lots of different outcomes of the change, what we'd like to do is get the essence of the change. It's easy if you explain to your employees that you need to be more agile, or that the company needs more control, or maybe you need efficiency to be at the core of your business, or maybe you want to have a targeted approach to clients. So having those keywords, what is the attitude that you need to be successful in this new state? And if you can articulate those words clearly, it helps you generate alignment on the vision, and people know in their piece of the business, in the areas that they work every day, what they have to do to move from the current state to be more agile, or to be more controlling, or to be more efficient, right? So understanding what is the key word and making that the focus of the change effort is one of the critical steps for a successful change. So then we can go to create a destination postcard. If we were to live in that future state, what would that look like? How do we connect that future state with those inspiring words of higher purpose that tie to the business objective? It's a lot more appealing for people to have these words and to think, yeah, I like to live in a company where things are agile. I can get on board with that, right? Versus when the change is articulated to me with, a new org chart, I don't know what that means. And it's harder to get excited unless my box in the org chart lines up with everything I dreamed of, and that's hard to do for 1,000 employees, right? So getting this understanding of what is life like in this new state, what is this destination postcard? And this is one of the ideas from the book by Chip and Dan Heath. It's good to add enough granularity so that this destination is clear to everyone. And it's good to spend a little bit of time instigating this desire for the transformed state. So you want to get people with the desire to move in this direction. And then comes the inspirational side. Tap into the emotional pulse of the organization. Organizations have their own culture, or way of doing things. If you can align with the way people behave and articulate the coincidence of that alignment between the way they behave, their culture, and their personal purpose, and the change you want to instill, that's a really good way to get people to really grab onto the change and want to be part of it. So here's another area where the anthropological principle of people have personal purpose. You know, they want a reason to get up to bed every morning, right? And if you can line up their personal reasons and purpose to the things you'd like to achieve in the new state in the organization, then it's magic. Things are, you know, people are really ready to embrace the change. So I've given you a whole lot of different parts of the process, but putting together all these different concepts, the process that I'd like to suggest for change management strategies in organizations is first to focus, identify those key attitudes, to define a destination, have an objective that resonates at all levels and that summarizes in a few words where we'd like to be as an organization. And then the third step is in yellow because it's the most important one. It's a different color, inspiration. If we don't appeal to the mind and mobilize the emotions and get that elephant moving, it's going to be really hard to get things going. So, you know, forget all those presentations on the intellectual reasons why we should be going this or that direction. We need to get the people on board and people work on inspiration. And then the last three steps are more related to the implementation. So it involves recognizing some difficulties, and you do this first, even before celebrating the quick wins, right? People want to have someone to listen to them and hear their pain in getting there, right? And if you can just have sessions where you listen in and have a sense of shared pain and mutual support. I know it's hard, and I'm here to, you know, be with you through these difficult moments. But we have a shared destination that we'd like to achieve, and we can also understand that it, you know, sometimes the road to get there is tough. Then the next step is tracking and celebrations. So you want to do recognize some early wins and make sure that you can show visible progress and share that with your teams. And finally, support for leaders and with leaders engagement through this, most senior leaders being part of it. Why is that? Because your middle management is feeling the pressure from both sides. So having support for those leaders is really, really important. So 6 steps is what I would recommend for this change management strategies. Okay, I violated my rule of 5, going by 1, but it's a relatively simple process. And what I'd like to do next is share with you some examples of where I've applied a few of these steps in my experience through my years as a leader. Okay, so let's move to our case studies. My first case study is leading the business unit transformation for exploration at the full exploration department. So the situation in this case was really unfavorable. We were in the middle of a financial crisis for our company, which came on a few months before the pandemic. The pandemic came in, and that made our situation super difficult for the company, thinking that we wouldn't, live another month before our debt exceeded any of our income. So transformation was absolutely essential for company survival. So the rational piece was obvious. No one needed any explanations of why we needed to have any change, right? So what we did at that time in the focus to adapt, we needed to move from being a frontier explorer that was proving out-of-the-box technical concepts in the most unexpected places, so a fairly ambitious and aggressive type of attitude, to become a business-oriented, value-adding function. So quite a different tact and attitude that we needed to adopt. So how did we get inspiration to get people to come on board? Well, there was an ingrained culture for passion for the impossible. This was a team of people that really thrived in very difficult environments and had a desire to prove others wrong, find things where no one had expected anything, and that was their motto, you know, their way of working. So taking that attitude that already existed in the organization and channeling that with the allegory of we're going to the moon and it's going to be a super difficult trip. And we're doing something that is nearly impossible. And that's what this trip is about. It's what helped us enlist people into this reduction efforts that we had for personnel with that mindset of acceptance and understanding that this was the best for the team. So the result was reducing personnel from 170 to 25 people, maintaining a sense of team, both for the people that remained and for the people that left. Keeping those friendships even when people were outside the company, reducing CapEx to 50% of the approved amount. So we had commitments and program for the year that we needed to execute, and we didn't have the CapEx required to front them up. So we needed to do a lot of different negotiations in terms of deferring and opting out and finding ways to not overcommit. And we also reduced the portfolio from 14 countries to 6 without negative reputational consequences. And that took a lot of, difficult conversations, not only with the team, but once the team was on board and understood that those were the things we needed to do with all of our partners and with the countries, the host countries that we were working in. So this is kind of the first case study, probably the most difficult change effort that I led in my life. Another example, a little bit, lighter, just to change the mood, is a streamlining organization. And this came organically. I joined this group that had a number of central coordinators that collated information from affiliates for production. And we used all the conglomerated information to produce global forecasts for the production company. And the role was more of an administrative type role. But we were privy to very, very relevant information that could be used strategically. So when I joined the group, and I was just a member of the group, I wasn't the leader of the group, it just seemed to me that we spent a lot of time changing the format of the information that we received from all the affiliates so that we could compare apples to apples and then make sense out of it in terms of putting it together and summarizing it in reports. We wasted a lot of time. We couldn't compare things, and we weren't using the information we had at hand for any strategic purposes. So the focus for Evolution was to change the relationship with the affiliates from an obligation to report to us to let's together coordinate and strategically plan our production for the full company. So you're part of a team, an essential part of a global team, and what happens in your affiliate impacts the results for the full company. And if we can plan ahead and understand what challenges you're having, we can make sure that other teams pick up your slack or give you maybe additional CapEx so that you can pick up the slack when things go wrong in a different team. So what provided the inspiration there that the affiliates had a role in the total portfolio, and sharing this global information could make their roles more relevant within the full organization. So changing that, the way they view the relationship with the central group, and changing the role of the central group to how they could facilitate opportunities for the various affiliates is what enabled this change to happen. Well, what happened is we eliminated this need for internal translation. We reduced the the group from 5 to 4 individuals. I actually worked myself out of a job here. But we removed some of the tasks from the coordinator jobs, and we created a system that enabled the company to have not only a view of the current production, but also a strategic view for planning the production in a forward basis. So that was the second example for change. And the third example, and I think this is what happens more often than not, is that we have an unexpected fact that comes across, and it forces us, it launches us into change without the forethought of a planned effort. So in this case, I was dealing with an unexpected failure. I was a new leader for a group that had just completed a disappointing exploration well. They had drilled a very expensive well with very high expectations, and it was the first in a full drilling campaign of several wells. So to have the first well be disappointing, that was just a killer, So the staff was divided in two camps. There were the pessimistic camp and the optimistic camp. And they were so ingrained in their attitudes that it was very difficult to collaborate. And besides that, the drilling campaign was being questioned across the company. We just set out this big budget to spend on this exploration campaign, and with the first well being disappointing, there were doubts about continuing on and drilling all the rest of the wells that were planned. So the focus to evolve, we looked at this failure to discovery of a new reservoir with play upside. We had seen shallow shows all throughout the drilling, so we were really excited in the initial drilling of the well to then come to our bottom reservoir, and the trap was breached. But we focused in on all the shows at the top and discovered there was a thin reservoir that we had penetrated, and we spent some effort to map that reservoir and identify a new play. In order to get those two groups to collaborate, we got the optimistic folks to point us to those new reservoirs, and we got the pessimistic folks to put scrutiny on that to make sure that we weren't just trying to console ourselves out of a bad situation. So that scrutiny was put to work instead of building on the pessimism. So the result is that we were able to validate this new play and test a new area, and detected risk on some of the remaining prospects. And we drilled a second well, which resulted in a discovery for 700 million barrels. And because the reservoir was shallower, it was easier to produce. It was a more economic play. So this ended up being a successful change as well. So I walked through 3 different examples on how to apply those principles that I laid out at the beginning to different change efforts that I had during my career. And I had a number of more examples, but I thought those 3 were illustrated different scales of change and change that came about because of different reasons. But I also wanted to share with you, since I'm now consulting, what is the approach to leading change from the consulting side of things. So the approach that I'm taking is to engage a small group, both individually and as a team. And when we lay out our approach, we lay out sprints that line up with the process milestones so that we work in small projects or small sprints and attain different milestones one by one. We have a number of discovery sessions with a process. So this leads the team to identify the issues and develop the answers. No being internal to the company, it's very delicate to make sure that the answers come from the team themselves, because they know everything that they need for applying new solutions. So the key is not to make the suggestions myself, rather ask questions so that the team has the space to identify those issues and identify the answers themselves. So while I lead the process, really the client owns the process. And that we look at different outcomes captured in attitudes to adopt, so that we can align with those core values and the purpose of the folks in the team. And then the changes are proposed and adopted before a final plan for change is completed. Because when people are able to articulate in just a few words those attitudes, those come out natural. We're not waiting for anything to be set up for people to adopt those attitudes. So I think that's the beauty of the process. In conclusion then, dynamic world is demanding effective change management as a daily tool. And when we have too much focus on finance and business objectives, we often forget about organizational resilience and the people focus. So much of the progress desired is killed by the focus on the intellectual side of things, on the rational side of things, on the business side of things. And when we have clarity on mindset and vision of the destination, this facilitates for people to get on board and want to have a piece of the change, have that excitement on the journey, and tap into their personal aspirations. And I believe organizations can deliver transformational change if we have a simple framework and a focused approach, and having the emotional pulse energized by the change. So thank you. This concludes the presentation part, and I'm open to any questions. Mary, you're muted.
So sorry. Okay. Why do you say that change is a constant right now?
Why do I say change is a constant? Well, I think we are wired as people to evolve, right? No one wants to be static. We all want to grow. We want to learn. We want to do more things. So it's ingrained in our nature as people to have this desire for change, to grow, to adapt. And I think there are some environmental circumstances that are making change a lot more evident and a lot faster for us right now. Part of it is the communications are instant. You used to need to see a person to then talk to them, or you call them on the phone. But now you can put it in Instagram or in Facebook, and it's just everybody knows about it, right?
Yeah.
So the speed at which things move is much faster. And I think that accelerates a number of things. And also the speed at which our environment changes in terms of technology, it is also quite fast. So those things, the combination of the way we're wired as changing and adapting people, the way we can communicate super fast about what's happening, and any news, can run super fast, and the way technology evolves so quickly, are all making us live in a place of much change, and that's a little bit different from what it was, maybe 50 years ago.
Right. Okay. We've got. You talk about involving the person. How can this be done in a large organization?
So I think I spoke a little bit about that already, but in the end, large organizations are groups of people, and without the people, you can't do anything. So, and also large organizations are set up in ways that are smaller groups of people that work together. So I think it comes down to knowing your employees. And yeah, maybe the top leader doesn't know all of the employees personally, but at some level, there's a leader that knows all of the employees that work with them. And I think that's the level of relationship that is needed to be able to engage people and meet them where they are. Unless you get to that core, unless people wouldn't do things from the inside, it's going to be hard to adapt. You know, I don't know if anybody in the audience has had a whole lot of luck maybe adopting a diet because their spouse tells them to, right? I mean, you just need to make that decision yourself, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. When was the last time your teenager daughter or son, you know, turned down the music because you told them that they were going to go deaf? You know, unless they decide that it's advantageous for them to do that, they're just not going to do it. So same happens in organizations. Unless people decide that whatever is coming is good for them, is attractive to them, is something that comes out of their heart, it's going to be really hard to implement.
Okay. About, is change management something that you can learn, or is it something that comes naturally? Change does not come naturally.
Right. So, I mean, through my leadership years, I've had to learn a lot on the go. And, you know, some things were successful, some were very good learning experiences. But I've had more time to learn about it and read about it and consider and use process. And there's definitely a lot that can be learned. So to think that because we belong to large organizations, we don't need to learn change management, I think that's a fallacy. I think there's a lot to be learned. There's some good classes out there. There's some good books out there. But I think the most effective way to learn is with a coach. So to, you know, have interactions with someone that helps provide, you know, those steps in moments of trials and yeah, working with someone to test try these principles and adapt to the local conditions.
Okay. So how do you relate the attitudes mentioned in business results desired?
Okay, well, I think that's a good question, Mary. So I think, you know, most organizations have their set of values that they work with, right? And their mission statements have some core values. And for the most part, the core values are quite general. It'd be hard to think that if integrity is a core value of your organization, people in your organization would want to behave in ways that are not with integrity, right? So,
Right.
yeah. So it's just distilling those things to a pretty personal level. And like I was mentioning, it's different to work in an organization that aspires to be efficient than to work in an organization that aspires to be creative. And it's relatively easy to get some of those words to resonate with people. So rather than to say we're going to do things this and that and the other way, and now we're going to be creative, it's better to propose to people that creativity is a core value of the organization. We know people in our organization are creative, and we count on your creativity to help us thrive in that space.
Okay. Here's one. How do I get my leaders to recognize and adopt the framing you have shared about this different style of change?
That's a good question. I think I would start with sharing some of the books and also, you know, having conversations about the simplicity of this. Many change approaches, especially if you go with the big four consulting firms, they have hundreds of steps. They're so complex. By the time you get through even listing the steps, your organization has different issues. That may have worked in 1990, but in 2025, things are moving too fast. And if we try to do 100 things, probably won't attain any of them. So I think the simplicity could be a pretty attractive way to help leaders adopt this different framework. And being a simple approach, you don't have a whole lot to lose. So those may be 2 points or 2 ways to help your leaders try this out. But I think the other way is to bring this personal, the idea of personal engagement, because it's pretty obvious. I mean, you can think of many, many examples in your own life where, you know, if someone tells you to change your behavior, but if you're not convinced, it's just not going to happen. So in a large organization, how many times do you want to replicate that?
Yeah, there was a slide that you had that talked about the incentives. The number 3 point was incentives. How do you get people to, because everybody's incentivized by different things. If it's money, if it's work from home, if it's work-life balance, what is it? How do you figure that out, especially in a large corporation when you're dealing with different personalities and different carrots that they bite, that they'll bite?
For sure. No, that's super tricky. I think it's important to involve people in the change so that they would be providing themselves the incentives. I think it's just really critical to know your employees. When you know your people, you can help better assign them to tasks that resonate with their preferences. You know, one of the classic examples I had in my career, I had a person in my group that had just the most fantastic ideas, new ideas. He could, you know, look at something and see it in 5 different ways. And it was just great. But then he wasn't motivated to go test them out. Having to do the tough work to test out the ideas, that just wasn't what he was good at, you know? So he was on to thinking of the next great idea. And so he had a reputation of poor performance. And it really wasn't that. He had some great ideas. And if you put it to make maps, it was a waste of his great ideas he had. So we paired him up with some other people that were better at executing, right? And they liked the idea part. So he was able to just come up with lots of ideas and have someone else run them down to see if they had any merit, right? So anyways, I think understanding what people are good at is really important to get the most out of them. And it's really important for the people to be happy at work. And you want them to be happy because when they're happy, they're productive. People that are not happy, they're just not productive. So it's good for them and it's good for the business. It's just as simple as that.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you presented this in just a handful of steps. I mean, can this be done effectively in a large, or do you need a large consulting firm to come in and do that kind of, to do the steps with your teams?
I mean, you know, I think it's okay for people to test the steps on their own. I think sometimes it helps to have an independent person kind of hand-holding the process for a couple of reasons. Because there's a little bit of objectivity that comes with being from outside. And I think it also provides a safe environment for people to really speak their minds and have an opportunity to put forward ideas. So those private meetings are just as important as the group meetings, where people have an opportunity to tell you, well, if it was me, I would do it this way, you know. And just the fact that they can put it out there, whether it goes anywhere or not, helps people feel like they're part of the process. So yeah, so I would recommend, you know, working with someone external can have its advantages.
Right.
Yeah, in large organizations, you can find someone external to the group that you're dealing with, and you know, being part of the organization, but from a different section or a different business unit, and that can work out well as also.
Okay, well, it looks like we're out of questions unless anybody else writes one in. And out of time. So thanks for attending today's webinar. Later today, you will receive a link to the recording of today's webinar, an evaluation form, and a link to SCA's website for more information about the business advisory services that Dr. Oliveira Riley provides for SCA, including those related to asset value optimization, organizational efficiency, non-operator influence, strategy, and transformation. Thank you all for attending. Goodbye.
Thank you.